What if the person you once overlooked became the only face you could remember, even after losing every other memory? It started on a rain-soaked evening, the kind that seems to wash color out of the world. Cars moved slowly through the glistening streets, their headlights bleeding gold into the puddles. Inside a corner cafe, he sat by the window. Daniel Avery, 36, architect, composed, the sort of man who noticed details in buildings but rarely in people. He was tracing the rim of his coffee cup, distracted, his phone lighting up every few seconds with emails he didn't care to open. Across the room, a woman stood by the counter, waiting for her order. Her name was Evelyn Hart. She was the type of person most people didn't notice right away. Quiet posture, hair tucked behind her ear, eyes that lingered on things others looked past. Daniel glanced at her once, maybe twice, and that was it. She smiled politely when their eyes met. He didn't smile back. In that moment, they were just two strangers breathing the same rain-heavy air. He couldn't have known that this would be the last ordinary day of his life. A week later, Daniel was driving home from a late meeting. The rain returned, heavier this time, the sky swallowing the road in a blur of gray and silver. His phone buzzed, another message, another distraction. He looked down for half a second. When he looked up, the world had vanished into a wall of light. The impact was violent, metal folded like paper, glass fractured into stars. Then nothing. When Daniel woke, it was silent, too silent. The kind of silence that feels like a missing frequency in your brain. He was in a hospital room, sunlight filtering through half-drawn curtains, machines humming beside his bed. A nurse entered, smiling softly. "You're awake," she said. He tried to answer, but his voice cracked, his throat was dry, his head fogged. "What happened?" "You were in an accident," she said gently. "But you're lucky to be alive." He blinked, trying to remember. Faces floated up in his mind, his co-workers, his sister, someone he loved. But when he tried to attach names, everything slipped away. He didn't recognize his own reflection when they handed him a mirror. His face looked familiar but wrong, like a photograph seen through water. The doctors called it post-traumatic amnesia. The memories, they said, might come back slowly or not at all. Weeks passed. He relearned how to tie his shoes, how to cook, how to find his way around his apartment. But the strange thing was this. Every night, in dreams or flashes, he saw one face, a woman's face. Brown hair, kind eyes, a smile that never seemed to fade. He couldn't place her. She wasn't in any of his photographs. She wasn't a friend, not a colleague. When he described her to his sister, she frowned. "Doesn't sound like anyone we know." And yet, she was the only face that felt real. One afternoon, during physical therapy, the nurse wheeled him through the hospital garden to get some fresh air. It was a gray day, clouds hanging low, the faint scent of wet soil in the air. And then there she was, sitting on a bench under the canopy of a willow tree, the same woman from his dreams. She looked up as he passed, as if she'd been waiting. Her eyes widened, and for a heartbeat, they just stared at each other. "Do you know me?" Daniel asked, his voice trembling slightly. A small, almost sad smile formed on her lips. "Not anymore," she said. Her name tag read, Evelyn Hart, volunteer. After that, she started showing up often. Sometimes she brought him books. Sometimes she just sat nearby while he tried to remember who he was. She didn't talk much, but when she did, her words felt steady, grounding. "You used to come here," she said one afternoon, when the air smelled faintly of rain. "To this cafe across the street. You ordered the same thing every time. Black coffee, 2 sugars. You sat by the window and drew in that little notebook." Daniel frowned. "How do you know that?" Evelyn hesitated. "Because I worked there. I saw you almost every day." He tried to picture it, the cafe, the light, the steam rising from a cup. And suddenly, there it was, a flash of memory. A voice calling out an order. A smile he didn't return. Her smile. She was the woman he'd ignored. From then on, something shifted between them. He began asking her questions about her life, her music, the things she loved. He discovered she painted small canvases of cityscapes in muted blues and grays. She told him she liked watching people, not out of curiosity, but because everyone has a story they're trying to hide. He laughed once, saying, "Then you must have seen mine." "I saw something," she said softly, "but I think you were still building it." As the days turned to weeks, Daniel's memory started to return, but only in fragments. He remembered numbers, structures, the blueprint of a building he never finished. Yet the people, the moments, the emotions, they remained blank. All except for her. Evelyn became the thread that connected him to the world again. One evening he asked her why she volunteered. "Because I lost someone here," she said, looking toward the distant hospital wing. "Someone I wasn't ready to lose." He wanted to ask who, but the heaviness in her voice told him not to. Instead, he reached out and touched her hand. It was a small gesture, but for the first time since the accident, he felt something like belonging. But there was something strange. The doctors noticed it first, when they tested his memory, showing him photographs of people he used to know. His brain stayed quiet. No spark, no recognition. But when they showed him a picture of Evelyn taken from the volunteer board, something lit up. A burst of electrical activity across his temporal lobe, like his mind had been waiting for that one face. "Remarkable," one neurologist said. It's as if her image has replaced all others. Daniel didn't care about the science. All he knew was that when she wasn't there, the world felt thinner, faded. One morning, he woke to find her seat empty. The nurse said she hadn't come in that day, then the next, and the next. His anxiety grew until he couldn't stand it anymore. He signed himself out early, despite the doctor's warnings. He went back to the cafe, the one across from the hospital, the one where it had all begun. It looked the same rain-streaked window, the same hum of quiet chatter, but she wasn't there. Evelyn Hart, he told the barista. She used to work here. Do you know where she went? The barista looked puzzled. Evelyn Hart, she repeated. Sir, there hasn't been anyone by that name working here for years, he frowned. No, that's impossible. I saw her, just last week. She shook her head. I've been here 3 years, never heard of her. He left, unsettled. Outside, the rain began again, blurring the world into reflections. He walked through the city, her name echoing in his mind. Evelyn Hart. Evelyn Hart. When he returned to the hospital, he went straight to the volunteer registry. The receptionist scrolled through the records, then looked up with confusion. There's no Evelyn Hart listed here, she said. Are you sure you have the right name? He did. He was sure. That night he couldn't sleep. He sat by his window, the rain whispering against the glass. He replayed every moment, her voice, her smile, the way she said he used to sit by the window and draw. What if she hadn't been talking about the past at all? What if she'd been talking about now? Then he remembered something. The bench under the willow tree, the one where he first saw her. He hadn't gone back there since. The next morning he did. The air was still. Dew clung to the grass. He approached the bench slowly, heart pounding. There, on the wooden slats, someone had carved 2 initials, EH, beside them, faintly etched, were the words, I saw you before you saw yourself. He sat down, staring at the carving, a chill running through him, and for the first time, a memory hit clear, vivid. It was the day of the accident. The rain, the headlights, the flash. And just before the crash, a woman's voice had called his name. He'd looked up and seen her, standing at the corner, umbrella in hand. Evelyn. But that couldn't be, because the doctors had told him something else about that night. That he wasn't alone in the accident. That there had been a pedestrian crossing the street, someone who didn't survive. Someone named Evelyn Hart. The world seemed to tilt. The rain returned, gentle but endless, as if time itself was holding its breath. Daniel closed his eyes, hearing her words again, not anymore. And in that moment, he finally understood. But what he couldn't understand, what no doctor, no logic could explain, was how he could still see her, hear her, feel her hand in his even now, and why, even after remembering everything, she was the only one who never faded. The wind stirred the willow branches, whispering like her voice. He turned, thinking he saw her figure by the tree, faint, shimmering through the mist. Evelyn, he called softly, but the only answer was the rain. Still, he stayed there waiting, because somehow, deep down, he knew this wasn't the end of her story. Or his, not yet. The rain didn't stop. It fell in silver threads, threading through the air like fine silk, wrapping the city in a damp, muted quiet. Daniel sat beneath the willow, the wet grass soaking his clothes. The carved initials staring up at him. EH, 2 letters that now carried the weight of a lifetime. He traced them with a trembling finger, feeling the grooves worn smooth by years, or maybe by someone who returned to this spot as often as he had. He closed his eyes. He could still hear her voice, clear and soft, cutting through the haze of memory and grief. I saw you before you saw yourself. The words didn't make sense yet, but they resonated, like a key half turned in a lock. He breathed in, trying to anchor himself, and when he opened his eyes again, the park was empty. Empty, except for the faint shimmer in the corner of his vision. He turned, and for the briefest instant, he saw her, Evelyn, translucent, standing at the edge of the willow's shadow. She wasn't solid. She flickered, like a memory caught in a rain puddle, and then she was gone. Daniel's heart pounded. Was it a trick of light? A lingering hallucination from the trauma? Or had she really been here, some remnant of her that refused to vanish? He stood, shaking, and walked back to the hospital. The corridors smelled of antiseptic and coffee, the fluorescent lights humming a constant nervous rhythm. He asked the receptionist again about Evelyn, pressing for any record, any clue. Sir, you've asked before, the receptionist said with polite firmness. We have no record of anyone by that name volunteering here. Daniel felt the room spin. No record, no trace, no explanation. It wasn't just impossible, it was impossible in a way that gnawed at the edges of his mind. He remembered her face with a clarity that made all other memories blur, but every factual check denied her existence. He wandered through the city after leaving the hospital, the streets damp and reflective, neon lights fracturing into pools of color. He passed the cafe again, the one where he had first noticed her. It was quieter now, the scent of coffee replaced by baked bread and toasted croissants. He hesitated at the door, pushed it open, and walked in. The barista, a young woman with a name tag that read Clara, smiled politely. Can I help you? She asked. Evelyn Hart, Daniel said, almost whispering, as if speaking too loudly would shatter the fragile connection he felt. She worked here, Clara tilted her head, confused. I'm sorry, sir. No one by that name has worked here in my time. Not in the last few years. Daniel's hands shook. But she was here. I saw her just last week. Clara smiled faintly, polite but firm. I think you might be mistaken. Mistaken. The word was a punch to the chest. Daniel stepped outside, the chill of the evening cutting through his soaked jacket. The city felt alive but distant, like he was watching a film in which he wasn't really part of the story. He walked aimlessly until he found himself in front of a small bookstore tucked between two taller buildings. Its windows were fogged, shelves heavy with dust and age. On a whim, he stepped inside. The smell of old paper and ink was comforting, grounding. Behind the counter, an older man with silver hair looked up and nodded. Looking for anything in particular, he asked. Something unusual, Daniel said, about someone named Evelyn Hart. The man paused, eyes narrowing, then pointed to a back corner. You might try the local archives. Sometimes people leave traces there that don't appear in records. It was a small lead, but it was enough. Daniel thanked him and left, feeling a surge of purpose he hadn't felt since the accident. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets slick and reflective, like glass stretched across asphalt. The archives were an old municipal building, the kind where the smell of dust and mildew made your lungs heavy. Daniel ran his fingers over files and ledgers, scanning names, addresses, volunteer logs. Hours passed. Just when he thought he would find nothing, he stumbled across a series of handwritten notes in a logbook from 5 years ago. Evelyn Hart, Volunteer Ward 6. A shiver ran through him. There it was, proof she had existed. But as he read further, his stomach dropped. There was a note, barely legible in faded ink: accident patient, not expected to survive, Evelyn Hart. He blinked, staring at the words as if they were written in fire. He felt his knees weaken. The Evelyn he had been seeing, the one who had guided him, comforted him, lingered in his dreams. She had died in an accident 5 years ago, and yet, here she was. Every morning, every afternoon, every fleeting moment when he thought she might be real. Daniel's mind raced. Was this some projection of his own fractured memory, a hallucination born from grief and trauma? Or had she somehow reached through time, through space, just to be with him? The questions gnawed at him, but he couldn't stop. He needed answers. He needed to see her. He returned to the willow tree that night, under a sky streaked with clouds and silver moonlight. He traced the carvings with his fingers again, the words echoing in his mind. He sat quietly, listening to the wind and the faint rustle of leaves. Hours passed, shadows lengthened, and then he heard it, the softest footstep, almost imperceptible, crunching on wet grass. Daniel, the voice was unmistakable, gentle, familiar, impossibly real. His heart jumped. He rose to his feet, scanning the darkness, and there she was, standing beneath the willow, solid this time. Not a flicker, not a memory. Her eyes met his, filled with a depth that made his chest ache. I've been waiting, she said. Daniel opened his mouth, but words failed. He could only take a step forward, then another. Evelyn, don't call me that, she said softly. Not yet. He frowned. Not yet. She shook her head. You're not ready. There are things you need to remember first. Things you forgot. And things you've never known. The air seemed to thrum with tension, the world around them falling away. Rain had returned in whispers, settling on leaves and puddles. Daniel felt the pull of her gaze, the gravity of her presence. He wanted to ask questions, to demand answers, but he felt something deeper, a sense that he needed to listen, to wait. I thought you were gone, he whispered. I was, she said, and I am. But in a way, I never left. He searched her face, desperate to understand, to reconcile the impossible. How are you here? Her eyes darkened slightly, a shadow passing over her delicate features. There are things about this world that don't obey the rules, you know. Time, memory, love. Sometimes they bend. Sometimes they reach across impossibilities. Daniel felt his pulse spike. His mind spun with half-formed thoughts. Fragments of the accident, the hospital, the visions, the archives. It was too much. He needed clarity. You're saying you're not alive? He asked, voice trembling. She nodded slowly. I died 5 years ago. But you are not like the others. You survived because I stayed. You can see me because I never stopped being a part of you. He staggered back a step. A part of me. Yes, she said, stepping closer. Every moment you thought of me, every fleeting vision. That was me, holding on, waiting for you to be ready to see. Daniel sank to his knees, overwhelmed. His mind swirled with grief, disbelief, and a strange, aching relief. He wanted to reach for her, to touch her, to hold her as he had imagined countless times in the hospital and in his dreams. She knelt beside him, placing her hand over his. The touch was cold, ethereal, yet it carried warmth, a life of its own. You've been holding yourself back, she said, afraid to remember, afraid to see. But now, you have to face the truth. What truth? He asked, voice barely audible. That you loved me, she said, voice breaking slightly. Even when you didn't know my name, even when you ignored me. You loved me, Daniel, and that is why you can see me now. The revelation hit him like a physical blow. Memories cascaded in fragments, the cafe, the notebook, the small smiles. the passing moments he'd dismissed, every small interaction, every glance he had failed to return, every choice that seemed insignificant. It had all been part of a story he had forgotten. "I loved you," he whispered, incredulous, disbelief threading through his tone. "Yes," she said, "and it's not too late, but you have to choose. Remember, truly remember, or lose me again." The wind shifted, sweeping through the willow branches, carrying the scent of rain and something indefinably familiar. Daniel looked at her, truly looked, and for the first time since the accident, he felt the weight of his own heart in his chest, heavy, trembling, alive. He realized, with a shock that made his knees weak, that she wasn't just a memory. She was a bridge, a tether, and if he let go of her now, even for a moment, he might never find his way back. The park fell silent. The city hummed distantly in the background. The moments stretched, suspended between rain and shadow, past and present, and then she spoke again, her voice a whisper that seemed to ripple through time itself. "Are you ready, Daniel?" He nodded, though his hands shook. His heart pounded in his ears, a drumbeat of fear, hope, and longing. "I'm ready," he said. Her hand closed over his, a faint glow emanating from her touch. The world tilted. The rain seemed to slow, time itself holding its breath. Daniel felt a surge of memory, a pull he could not resist. Faces, voices, moments he had forgotten, some familiar, some alien, all rushing toward him in a torrent of clarity. And then, a sharp burning flash of light. He blinked. The willow was gone. The park was gone. The city hummed in distant waves, fragmented, distorted, and she was no longer beside him, but her voice lingered, echoing in his mind. "Not everyone can see me, not everyone can survive me, but you've remembered enough to follow." Daniel stumbled, his body weak, knees pressed into wet asphalt somewhere he did not recognize. The world felt different, thinner, more fragile, like it had been peeled back to reveal its inner gears. And yet, through the haze, he could see a faint path of light, stretching ahead of him, beckoning. He rose, unsteady, heart hammering, and took the first step forward. Every instinct screamed to run, to doubt, to turn back. But something deeper, something he could neither name nor deny, pulled him onward. The rain returned in whispers, guiding him, wrapping him in its silver threads. And somewhere, just beyond the edge of vision, he felt her waiting. The journey was far from over, but Daniel knew one truth with absolute certainty. He could never ignore her again, and this time he would follow no matter where it led. Daniel stumbled forward along the faint ribbon of light, his feet splashing through shallow puddles that glimmered like fractured glass beneath the dim, unnatural sky. The world around him felt suspended, neither fully real nor entirely imagined. Buildings flickered in and out of form, their edges wavering like memories half remembered. The air smelled of ozone and wet concrete, metallic and sharp, carrying the faint whisper of rain that didn't quite reach the ground. Every step felt heavier than the last, as though he was wading through a current of something intangible, something alive. He stopped for a moment, pressing his palm against the cold, wet wall of a structure that resembled a warehouse, though he couldn't recognize it. His reflection wavered on its surface, distorted, almost unrecognizable. He tried to steady his breathing. Every instinct screamed that he should run, but something deeper, primal, rooted him in place. A voice faint, impossibly near, brushed against his consciousness. Daniel was her, Evelyn, but the tone was different, not comforting this time. There was urgency, almost fear threading through the sound. He spun, scanning the shifting landscape. Shadows pooled and stretched around him, distorting familiar shapes into threatening silhouettes. The lighted path he had been following flickered like a candle in a draught, wavering before him. "Evelyn," he called, his voice cracking in the still, uncanny air. "Where are you?" A figure emerged from the darkness, flickering at first like static on an old television screen. Then, more clearly, she took form. Her eyes were wide, haunted, reflecting something he hadn't seen before, not the calm guidance of the hospital, not the quiet patience of the willow bench, but raw, urgent emotion. "You shouldn't be here," she said, taking a cautious step back. "This place, it's not what it seems," he frowned, heart hammering. "Not what it seems. Evelyn, I've been following you." "Following me?" she interrupted sharply. "No, Daniel, you didn't follow me. You followed a memory, a shadow of something I left behind. And now you're too close." The words hit him like stones, too close to what he could feel a prickle along the back of his neck, a warning he couldn't quite name. The space around them seemed to contract, the walls of the warehouse like buildings leaning inward, whispering, echoing fragments of voices he didn't recognize. "I don't understand," he said, voice trembling. "I saw you." She shook her head. "You see me, but that doesn't mean you understand. You've been touching the edges of something dangerous, something that was never meant to reach you." Daniel's stomach twisted. "Dangerous? Evelyn, I don't know what's real anymore. I need you. I can't lose you again." Her eyes softened for a brief second, but the tension didn't leave her face. "And that is exactly why you could lose me." The ground trembled beneath him, faint at first, then stronger, as if the world itself was breathing in response to their confrontation. Shadows began to ripple across the ground, moving against the dim light. He tried to step back, but the puddles seemed to cling to his boots, rooting him in place. "Daniel, listen," she said, reaching out, but her hand wavered mid-air, like smoke. "I didn't come back for you. Not entirely. I came back to warn you." "Warn me? About what?" His voice cracked, fear threading through desperation. She swallowed, eyes darting around the flickering environment. "There are things you've forgotten, things that were hidden even from you. The accident, the hospital, the memories you've regained. None of it is coincidence. Someone, or something, has been guiding you, keeping you alive, keeping you tethered." Daniel staggered, trying to absorb her words. Tethered to what? Her gaze dropped, and a shadow fell across her face, dark and jagged. "To me, yes, but also to them, the ones who orchestrated everything that happened to you. They are not gone, and they will not stop until they've claimed what they believe belongs to them." A sudden gust of wind tore through the narrow alleyway, carrying with it a whisper, a murmur of names he didn't recognize. It slid along his spine like ice, sending a shiver racing through him. Something stirred in the shadows behind the flickering buildings. Something patient, waiting, unseen. Daniel's heart thundered. What do they want from me? Evelyn didn't answer immediately. Her hands twitched as though resisting some invisible pull. "You're special, Daniel. You were meant to survive, but surviving has a cost." "What cost?" he demanded, panic rising. "I've already lost everything. I've lost her. You've lost the wrong things," she interrupted sharply. "The people you think you remember, the life you believe you've lived. Those are distractions. They're meant to anchor you, to make you forget the true design behind it all." Daniel stumbled backward, pressing against a wall, his mind racing. The world around him seemed to pulse with an energy he couldn't comprehend. Buildings flickered between reality and something else, a lattice of light and shadow that seemed to stretch infinitely. He shook his head. "I don't understand. I thought finding you meant I could start to live again." "You can," she said softly, but her voice was tinged with fear. "But living again means knowing the truth about us, and the truth about what's coming." Before he could respond, a flash of light struck the alley behind them, snapping his head around. Shadows leaped and twisted, and a figure stepped into the fractured illumination. It was tall, faceless, and impossibly thin, its form flickering like static on a broken screen. Daniel froze, unable to move as it advanced slowly, deliberately. Evelyn reached out, grabbing his arm, her touch grounding him. "Don't turn to it," she whispered urgently. "It doesn't want to hurt you. Not yet. It wants something else. Your memory, your anchor, everything that makes you human." The figure paused, tilting its head, as though sensing their conversation. The air grew thick, suffocating, charged with a hum that vibrated in Daniel's chest. He felt an overwhelming pull, as if the very essence of him, his fear, his love, his memory of Evelyn was being drawn toward it. Daniel's knees buckled. What is it?" She shook her head. "I don't know exactly, but it's been waiting, watching, feeding on what people forget, and it knows you remember too much." The ground trembled again, violently this time, and the alley seemed to stretch and warp. Daniel's vision blurred. The edges of reality bent and twisted around the figure. He tried to scream, but only a low, strangled sound escaped his throat. Evelyn's hand gripped his tighter, grounding him, anchoring him to the fleeting thread of reality. Then, just as suddenly, the world snapped back. The light faded, the figure vanished, and Daniel was left standing alone in the alley. The puddles reflected only the faint moonlight, and the city hummed softly around him. But his heart was racing, his breath shallow. Evelyn stepped closer, her face pale but determined. "You see now," she said softly, "this isn't just about remembering me. It's about remembering everything and what comes next. You can't face it alone." Daniel shook, trying to process what had just happened. I thought I could follow you. I thought finding you was enough. But it's not. It's never been about that." "No," she whispered, eyes glistening with something he couldn't name, fear, sorrow, urgency. "It's about choosing. Choosing who you are. Choosing what you will remember. Choosing who you will fight for. And choosing who you will trust." A gust of wind swept through the alley, carrying with it a strange metallic scent, tangy and sharp, like blood mixed with rain. Daniel felt a sudden pull in his chest, an instinctual warning. Something was coming, something he couldn't yet see, couldn't yet name. Evelyn took a step back, her form flickering again. "They're coming," she said, voice almost lost in the whispering wind. "You need to be ready, and Daniel, you need to remember who you were before all of this, or it will consume you entirely." Daniel's mind whirled. Faces, fragments of memories he hadn't fully reclaimed, blurred together, laughter, arguments, fleeting touches, moments of fear and love. He realized then that everything he had clung to, the hospital, the willow, the visions, was a foundation built on fragments, and if he didn't uncover the truth, he would have nothing left to hold on to. Evelyn reached for his hand again, but this time her fingers brushed only air. She shimmered, fading like mist in the wind. Her voice lingered, echoing in his mind, desperate, insistent. "Remember, Daniel, trust no one, not even yourself. They are closer than you think." The alley fell silent, the strange metallic temps lingering. Daniel's chest ached. The lighted path he had been following, the one that had led him to Evelyn, now dissolved before his eyes, leaving only shadow and uncertainty. And as he stumbled forward into the night, he realized with a cold, sinking certainty, the world he thought he was returning to, the reality he believed he understood, was already gone. And whatever had been guiding him all this time was not done with him yet. Somewhere in the dark, the whisper returned, faint but chilling. "We've been waiting for you, Daniel. Now, so have they." Daniel stopped, the weight of her words pressing into his bones. The city stretched before him like a maze of impossible angles, flickering lights, and hidden threats. He knew one thing: the path ahead would demand more than memory. It would demand courage, sacrifice, and the kind of trust he had never known he could give. With a shuddering breath, he took the first tentative step forward, into the unknown, and behind him, in the fractured shadows, something watched, silent, patient, hungry. The journey had just begun. Daniel moved forward, the night stretching out before him like a fractured mirror. Every step echoed through the deserted streets, the wet pavement reflecting flickering neon signs that hummed in distorted colors. The city had shifted, subtly, unnaturally. Alleys stretched further than they should, corners twisted into impossible angles, and the air was thick with the metallic scent that had clung to him since the alley encounter. His thoughts churned in a whirlpool of fear and determination. Evelyn's warnings replayed in his mind. "Trust no one, not even yourself." Those words were now his anchor, cutting through the haze of memory and uncertainty, though they only deepened his anxiety. He didn't know who they were, but he could feel their presence, lurking just beyond perception, bending reality in ways that unsettled even his fractured senses. A sudden piercing light flared in the distance, stark against the dim cityscape. He squinted, shielding his eyes. It wasn't a street lamp. The light pulsed rhythmically, almost like a heartbeat, and for a brief moment, he thought he heard a low, resonant hum vibrating through the ground. His chest tightened. That hum, he had felt it before, in the alley, when the faceless figure had appeared. He quickened his pace, moving toward the light despite the instinct screaming to run the opposite direction. Puddles splashed under his boots, sending shards of reflected neon into the dark. He noticed the buildings around him were changing, subtly warping with each step, as if the city itself were alive, breathing, testing him. And then he saw her, not Evelyn, but another presence. A figure standing at the intersection, framed by the pulsating glow. Unlike Evelyn, this one was solid, human, but its face was obscured beneath a hood. A sense of malice radiated from the figure, faint but undeniable. Daniel froze, the hairs on his arms rising. "Daniel Avery," the voice called, deep calm but laced with something dangerous. "We've been expecting you." His mind recoiled. How did they know his name? How could anyone know where he would go, what he would do? Fear coiled in his stomach, but alongside it surged an unrelenting drive. He had to confront this, whatever it was. "Who are you?" he demanded, voice echoing oddly in the warped space. The figure didn't answer immediately. Instead, it raised a gloved hand, and the light intensified, burning into Daniel's vision. Images flashed in his mind, memories, not all his, not all real. Scenes of Evelyn, scenes of strangers, blurred with visions of destruction, of shadows stretching across cities and lives. He staggered, clutching his head. "You've seen her," the figure said finally. "The one who clings to you, the one who keeps you tethered." Daniel's heart skipped. "Evelyn, what do you want from me?" The figure's voice softened, almost mockingly sympathetic. "I want what she left behind. The tether, your connection to her. But you've been reckless, Daniel. You've walked the line between memory and madness, and now it's time to pay the cost." Before he could respond, the ground trembled violently. A sudden shockwave threw him forward, and he fell onto the slick pavement, water splashing around him. The city around him rippled, walls bending and twisting as if reality itself were being rewritten. Panic gripped him, but Evelyn's presence surged inside his mind. He could feel her, not solid, not tangible, but a pull, a tether he could reach. "Daniel, hold on, don't let go." He scrambled to his feet, eyes scanning the shifting environment. Shadows moved independently of the light, crawling along walls and pooling in corners. The faceless figure advanced slowly, deliberately, each step sending a shiver through the air. Daniel turned a corner instinctively, running down a narrow alley that seemed to stretch endlessly. His lungs burned, legs ached, but adrenaline kept him moving. He felt the pulse of the city under his feet, the distorted hum in the air, and the ghost of Evelyn guiding him, urging him forward. Suddenly, the alley opened into a courtyard, circular, enclosed by crumbling buildings that leaned inward like silent sentinels. In the center, a faintly glowing portal hovered, translucent, shimmering with waves of energy that pulsed like a heartbeat. Daniel instinctively knew this was the source of the distortions, the focal point of everything he couldn't yet understand. And there, on the other side of the portal, was Evelyn. Solid, fully formed, her expression a mixture of urgency and sorrow. She raised her hand, beckoning him, but behind her, the figure from before emerged again, its form flickering between light and shadow, impossibly tall and thin. "Daniel," she called, voice echoing with the pull of unseen currents. "You have to choose now." His stomach dropped. A choice. What choice? And the figure, it moved closer, silent and patient, radiating a cold inevitability. Daniel's mind raced, fragmented images colliding with instinct and fear. He could feel the pull of the portal, the distorted gravity of the city, and the weight of Evelyn's gaze on him. He took a hesitant step forward. The portal shimmered, the hum intensifying, vibrating through his chest and teeth. His memory surged, flashes of the accident, of the hospital, the willow, the cafe. He remembered the fear, the longing, the grief, the small moments he had dismissed. Every fragment was a thread, every memory a tether. You can't hold her forever. The faceless figure's voice boomed suddenly, startling him. You're clinging to what is gone. To survive, you must sever the tie. Daniel staggered, heart hammering. No, he shouted. I don't care what it costs, I won't let go of her. Evelyn's form shimmered, her eyes filled with both relief and worry. Then you must face them, she said softly. And Daniel, face yourself. The tether binds you to me, yes, but it also binds you to the truth you've been running from. Only by embracing it will you survive. The ground shook again, stronger this time. Cracks spiderwebbed across the pavement, glowing faintly like molten veins. Shadows spilled from the edges of the courtyard, moving independently, whispering names he didn't recognize. Daniel could feel the presence of countless observers, entities that watched, waited, and judged his every decision. His chest heaved, mind racing. Fear, doubt, and desire collided in a torrent of emotion. He thought of the hospital room, of the willow, of every fleeting moment with Evelyn. The thought of losing her, truly, was unbearable. But the figure's words echoed relentlessly. To survive, you must sever the tie. Daniel clenched his fists, feeling the pulse of the portal in his bones. He took a step closer, then another toward Evelyn, toward the unknown. The faceless figure moved as well, a silent predator, matching his steps with impossible precision. Daniel, Evelyn whispered, almost inaudible over the rising hum. Trust yourself, trust what you remember, and what you feel. You don't have to let them control you. He felt the pull of the portal stronger now, a gravitational tug that seemed to reach into the core of his being. Flashes of memory assaulted him. His own past, fragmented and incomplete, intertwined with visions of Evelyn, her death, her guidance, and the lingering presence of whatever force was manipulating everything. A scream tore from his throat, raw and instinctive. As the shadows around him surged, the faceless figure lunged, dissolving into a torrent of black tendrils that reached toward him like living ink. Daniel stumbled backward, slamming against the courtyard wall. Pain shot through his chest as the tendrils brushed against him, searing, yet leaving no mark. Evelyn's voice was in his head, steady, grounding. Don't resist, move through it, remember. Daniel closed his eyes, letting the memories wash over him, anchoring him. He remembered the cafe, the notebook, the hospital room, every small act of attention, every glance, every moment he had dismissed. It all converged into a single truth. The tether was not a weakness, it was not a trap, it was connection, love, choice. He opened his eyes and lunged forward toward Evelyn, pulling the tether of memory, emotion, and determination through him like a lifeline. The portal pulsed violently, the courtyard shaking, shadows screaming in fury, and the faceless figure recoiling. Evelyn reached out, and their hands met. Light exploded between them, brilliant and white, burning yet warm, as if the culmination of every memory, every choice, every heartbeat had condensed into a single point. Daniel felt the pull of the world, the weight of everything lost and regained, everything uncertain. And then silence. The shadows retracted. The hum dimmed to a whisper. The portal hovered, faint and quivering, as if alive but wounded. Evelyn's gaze met his steady, unyielding, yet tinged with fear. Daniel's chest heaved. He was trembling, soaked, exhausted. He wanted to speak, to ask what had just happened, but the words caught in his throat. All he could do was look at her, understanding at last that the path ahead would demand everything he had: courage, memory, trust, and perhaps the willingness to confront truths he had been running from. Evelyn stepped closer, placing a hand on his cheek, warm and tangible. This is only the beginning, Daniel, she said softly. What comes next? We'll test everything you are, but if you fail. Her words hung in the air, heavy, unresolved. The wind shifted suddenly, carrying the faint metallic temps again, stronger this time, closer, omnipresent. The city trembled in response, shadows stirring at the edges of his vision. Daniel's pulse raced. The calm before the storm had ended. He realized then, with a chilling certainty, that whatever force had orchestrated his survival, manipulated his memories, and haunted the tether between him and Evelyn, it was not done, not by a long shot. And as he stared at the faintly glowing portal, at Evelyn's determined, frightened face, he understood the truth. The choice he had just made to reach for her, to trust the tether, was only the first step into a danger far greater than he could yet imagine. The city around them groaned, the shadows writhed, the air thickened with anticipation, charged with the promise of revelation and the threat of devastation. Daniel took a deep breath, heart hammering, and braced himself. The storm was coming, and nothing, not memory, not love, not courage, would be enough unless he faced it fully. Daniel's breath came in ragged bursts, each inhale sharp with the metallic temps that had followed him through the city streets. The courtyard stretched around him, warped and twisting, shadows flickering like living things. The portal pulsed between him and Evelyn, a shimmering wall of energy that vibrated with a strange rhythm, like a heartbeat not his own. The faceless figure had vanished for now, but the sense of being watched remained, heavy and suffocating. Evelyn's hand remained on his cheek, grounding him, tethering him to something human, something real. "Daniel," she whispered, voice barely audible over the faint hum of the portal. "You need to understand everything you've experienced. It was meant to prepare you. The accident, the hospital, your fractured memory. It was never random. You were chosen." He swallowed hard, feeling the words lodge in his throat. "Chosen? By who? By what? You said they, but you never said who they were." Her eyes darkened. The shimmer around her faltered for a heartbeat. "They are beyond your understanding, at least for now. They exist in the spaces between life and death, memory and reality. They pull strings you cannot see. They watch the world, waiting for those like you, those who can survive what they touch." Daniel shook his head, overwhelmed. I survived because of you, because I remembered you. That's all I know." She shook her head slowly. "No, you survived because you chose to see. You didn't just follow me. You held on to the tether when it would have been easier to let go. You held on to what matters." He felt the weight of her words pressing against his chest. The storm of events, the distortions, the shadows, the faceless figure, it all collided into a single terrifying clarity. He had not merely been a victim of circumstance, he had been part of a test, a trial that had been unfolding before he even realized it. The portal flared suddenly, brighter this time, and Daniel stumbled backward, shielding his eyes. In that flash, he saw something impossible, beyond the shimmer of energy. A city stretched endlessly, infinite and fractured. Buildings twisted into impossible geometries, streets looping into themselves, shadows crawling like veins over the concrete. And in the center, he saw figures moving, countless faceless forms, like the one he had encountered, all watching, all waiting. A wave of terror struck him. "Evelyn, what is this? What have I stepped into?" "This," she said, voice steady now, fierce, "is the truth you've been running from. The accident, your survival. They were never about saving you from death. They were about showing you what you are. And what you are is rare." Daniel's mind reeled. Rare. What did that mean? He felt like he was teetering on the edge of comprehension, and the ground beneath him trembled as if the city itself had noticed his hesitation. "They've been waiting," Evelyn continued, tightening her grip on his hand, "waiting for someone who could hold on, someone who could remember, someone who could see them, even when no one else could. That's why you survived. That's why I survived in part, in memory. We are anchors, tethers, and now, you must understand fully, or they will consume you." He felt the words dig into him, cutting through the haze of fear and doubt. Anchors, tethers. He thought of the hospital, the willow, the cafe. Every small moment he had remembered, fragments of humanity and love that had guided him through this impossible labyrinth. And then he saw it, or rather, he felt it. The portal's hum escalated, vibrating through his bones. Shadows writhed at its edges, forming shapes he could barely recognize, twisted reflections of his own past. Echoes of faces he had forgotten, flickering and distorted. They reached toward him not with malice but with inevitability, like rivers of darkness seeking their source. "You must step through," Evelyn said, eyes burning with intensity. "You must face them, face yourself, face the truth of everything that brought you here. If you hesitate, the tether will snap and you will lose me. You will lose everything." Daniel staggered, the weight of choice pressing down on him. He could feel the pull of the portal, the tug of memory, of love, of fear. His mind reeled, images flashing too fast to process. The accident, the hospital room, Evelyn at the willow, her smile, the carved initials, the whispers of shadows. Every fragment of his life, real and unreal, collided into a single, searing awareness. He had been preparing for this moment his entire existence, and yet he was utterly unprepared. A sudden gust of wind tore through the courtyard, whipping rain and debris across the cracked pavement. The portal pulsed violently, sending arcs of light across the space between them. Daniel's heart pounded. Every instinct screamed to retreat, to turn away, to run. But the tether pulled him forward. I don't know if I can," he admitted, voice shaking. "What if I fail? What if I lose you?" "You will fail if you hesitate," Evelyn said firmly. Her hand gripped his, steady, unyielding. "And you will lose me if you doubt yourself. But I believe in you, Daniel. I've believed in you from the moment I saw you, even when you didn't see me. And now, you must believe in yourself." The portal flared again, blindingly bright. Daniel felt the pull stronger than ever, like it was reaching into the very core of him. He stumbled forward, eyes tearing from the intensity of the light. He could feel something trying to grasp him from the other side, tendrils of energy laced with memory, fear, and something else, something ancient and patient. He closed his eyes and remembered Evelyn's smile, the quiet moments in the hospital, the willow tree, the cafe, the notebooks, every fragment he had clung to. He remembered her, he remembered himself, he remembered choice, and then he stepped. The moment was instantaneous. The world shattered. He felt weightless, suspended between reality and something that defied comprehension. Shadows screamed around him, twisting, writhing, reaching. But the tether held. Evelyn's hand was solid, warm, grounding him through the chaos. He opened his eyes. They were no longer in the courtyard. The portal had collapsed behind him, leaving only a vast expanse of white light, infinite and formless. And before them stood the truth, the one they had both been circling in fragments. Glimpses, whispers, countless faceless forms floated in the void, stretching infinitely in every direction. And at the center, he saw a figure, impossibly vast, radiating power and intelligence, its presence suffocating yet magnetic. The faceless figure from the alley, the shadows, the tendrils, all were part of it. All were emanations of the same entity. Daniel's breath caught. This is them. Evelyn nodded, voice steady but soft. Yes, the orchestrators, the watchers, the ones who shape the edges of memory and life. And they've been waiting for someone who could confront them, someone who could anchor what is fleeting, fragile, human. The entity shifted slightly, and Daniel felt a pull, not just on his body, but on his very sense of self. Memories flickered, threatening to unravel. Fear surged like liquid fire in his veins. But Evelyn's hand held him steady, reminding him of what was real, what mattered. You can't be afraid, she said. You cannot fight them as a man fights a man. You must face them as you face yourself, with all that you are, all that you've remembered, and all that you've chosen to hold on to. Only then. The words hung in the void. Daniel's heart raced. He felt the weight of every choice he had ever made, every fragment of memory he had clung to, every thread of love and fear and courage woven into him. The moment demanded everything, his mind, his body, his heart. The entity pulsed, shadows writhed, tendrils reaching for him, for Evelyn, for the tether. And then, with a clarity that struck him like lightning, he understood. The tether, the connection to Evelyn, the love, the memory. It was not a weakness. It was a weapon. It was the truth they could not manipulate. It was human. He tightened his grip on Evelyn's hand. She smiled faintly, almost imperceptibly, and he felt the surge of light pulse between them. Daniel lifted his head, heart hammering. He was ready. And for the first time, he did not feel small, lost, or fractured. He felt whole. The entity shifted again, sensing his resolve, and the void around them shivered. Shadows recoiled. Tendrils faltered. The vast presence before them seemed to pause, as if curious, calculating, challenged for the first time. Daniel exhaled slowly, the weight of fear and doubt melting into determination. The storm had not passed, the danger had not vanished. But for the first time, he knew whatever came next, he would not face it alone. Evelyn squeezed his hand. Together, she said. Together, he echoed. The void pulsed, the shadows stirred. The entity moved closer, an infinite force of memory and power. And Daniel stepped forward, tethered, anchored, ready into the heart of what had been waiting for him all along. The storm was here, and it was only just beginning. Daniel stepped through the shifting light, hand in hand with Evelyn, feeling the hum of the void around them gradually soften, the pull of the entity receding like a tide withdrawing from the shore. The tendrils of shadow dissolved, fading into whispers that no longer sought to unravel him. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, the air felt breathable, the world tangible, solid beneath his feet. Even in this strange ethereal space, Evelyn led him forward, guiding him through a corridor of light that seemed endless yet intimate, each step echoing softly, carrying the weight of all they had endured. Daniel's chest still throbbed with adrenaline, but beneath it stirred a quiet warmth, a pulse of relief tempered by awe. He looked at her, really looked, and saw not just the guide of his journey, but the embodiment of every truth he had clung to, memory, hope, and the fragility of life made resilient through connection. This place, he said finally, voice trembling, is it real? Evelyn's smile was faint, almost wistful. Real is a word that only makes sense when you've anchored yourself to something. Here, now, it's all of us. Daniel, you, me, the memories, the choices we've made. That is the reality that matters. He absorbed that, letting the words settle like stones in his chest. He realized he didn't need to understand everything, the entity, the shadows, the portals, not fully. What mattered was what he had discovered about himself along the way, that love and memory, tethered together, could withstand forces he had never imagined, that even in the face of something incomprehensible, the human heart could anchor what was fleeting. A faint wind stirred around them, carrying hints of rain, of willow leaves, of coffee and books, of moments small and vast that had once seemed meaningless. Daniel inhaled deeply. Each fragment of memory, every interaction with Evelyn, every choice he had made to hold on, they all swirled together, a mosaic of purpose and understanding. He had chased her across impossibilities, followed a thread through fractured reality, only to discover that the tether had always been his own courage and willingness to see, to feel, to remember. Evelyn released his hand briefly, letting it drift through the light. Daniel watched as the shimmer around her softened, her form becoming less distinct, yet more beautiful, more infinite. I don't belong entirely to this world, she said softly, and yet I've never left it. Not really. You carried me with you, Daniel, even when you thought you were alone. His throat tightened. I thought I lost you. So many times, and you almost did, she said, voice tinged with melancholy. But that's the thing. Sometimes, loss is not the end. Sometimes, it teaches us what to hold on to, what to fight for, and what we cannot ignore. You ignored me once, yes, but you remembered when it mattered. Daniel felt tears prick the corners of his eyes. The entirety of their journey, the confusion, the fear, the terror of the shadows and the unknown, all condensed into this simple truth, that human perception, attention, and care carried power far beyond what he had believed. That noticing, truly seeing another person, could alter realities in ways he had only begun to comprehend. The corridor of light widened, spilling into a scene that resembled their city, but softened, peaceful, whole. Rain-slicked streets glimmered in soft moonlight. Willow trees swayed gently in a breeze that carried the scent of spring. The city hummed, not with danger, but with quiet life, distant voices, laughter, the faint scent of coffee drifting from open cafes. It was the same city he had known, and yet transformed, tempered by understanding. Evelyn turned to him, her form beginning to fade into the surrounding light, translucent now, like a memory finally at rest. "You've done more than survive, Daniel," she said, eyes holding his, infinite and unwavering. "You've remembered, you've loved, you've chosen to see what others cannot. That is why you can carry me forward, even when I am not beside you." He gripped her hand one last time. "And if I forget," he whispered. "You won't," she replied, voice soft but certain. "Because memory is more than recollection, it is presence. Every time you choose, every time you notice, you remember. You carry it with you, always. That is the tether, the true tether. It does not break." The light around her shimmered, and she began to dissolve, slowly, gracefully, into the currents of existence itself. Daniel felt the loss like a physical weight in his chest, but it was tempered by understanding, by peace, by recognition that this was not an ending, merely a shift, a continuation of something larger than him. Something beyond the constraints of life, time, or memory. He stepped back, letting her go. And in that moment, he understood what the journey had been teaching him all along, that the act of seeing someone, of choosing to witness and care, could ripple across the fabric of existence. That even when we lose, even when people depart from our lives, the connections we nurture endure, shaping the world and ourselves in ways subtle yet profound. The city around him glowed softly in the fading light, shadows receding, the hum of possibility lingering. Daniel walked through the streets slowly, absorbing each detail, the shimmer of wet pavement, the rustle of leaves, the distant murmur of life continuing. He felt himself anchored, tethered not to fear, not to memory alone, but to the living, breathing world around him, and the people who had touched him even briefly. He came to the willow tree. The carved initials were faint but still present. Daniel knelt, tracing them with his fingers, and for a long moment allowed himself to simply breathe, to feel the intersection of past, present, and the infinite potential of what was to come. The memory of Evelyn lingered like the warmth of a sun he could carry with him, no longer ghostly, but integrated into his own heart. He leaned back against the trunk and looked up at the sky, now clear, stars shimmering with a calm brilliance that felt deliberate, intimate, welcoming. He realized he didn't have all the answers. He might never understand every thread, every orchestrator, every shadow that had touched his life. But he had discovered something deeper, the power of attention, of choice, of human connection, and the extraordinary force of truly seeing another person. A soft breeze brushed against his face, carrying the faint scent of rain and possibility. Daniel closed his eyes and let himself feel it fully. What does it mean to truly see someone? He wondered, internally. And if we can see, and be seen, what else might we change? The world moved around him, quiet but alive. Life, fragile yet resilient, pulsed in rhythms he could sense but not control. He rose slowly, brushing wet grass from his clothes, and began to walk down the familiar streets, each step deliberate, aware, tethered not just to memory but to the choice to live fully, to notice, to love. In the distance, faint lights of the city glimmered, and he could almost feel Evelyn's presence, not beside him, not corporeal, but integrated into the world itself, a reminder that connections endure, even across impossibilities. And as he walked, Daniel realized that the tether between them, between people, moments, love, memory, was not a chain to bind him, but a bridge, luminous and enduring, one that carried him forward, into the unknown, into life, into possibility. The willows swayed gently behind him, the city breathed, and Daniel, heart steady, mind clear, steps measured and aware, disappeared into the soft glow of night, carrying both loss and love, memory and choice, ready to see what awaited beyond the horizon. And somewhere deep inside, a question lingered, quiet, unanswerable yet profound. If we truly see one another, can anything ever be lost? The wind whispered, the trees rustled, and for a fleeting, eternal moment, Daniel understood. Seeing, truly seeing, was its own kind of survival.